On a quiet Sunday night, a daughter sat down to dinner and unknowingly began the end of her family. What started as laughter quickly descended into an autopsy of loyalty, love, and bitter betrayal. This isn't a story about money or inheritance. It is about the crippling cost of silence. And it's about the exact moment one quiet woman, tired of swallowing the poison of a family secret, finally decided her peace was worth more than their comfort.
Before we begin this story, let me know where you are listening from in the comments below.
My name is Grace Whitman. I'm 33 years old. And what I'm about to tell you today will forever change the way you see your own family. They say every family has its rituals. Ours is Sunday dinner. The ceremony where love wears judgment's perfume and laughter hides small knives. The Portland sky hung low that evening, a wet gray lid pressing down. I drove the familiar route to my parents' house, heater on, window cracked, as if I could vent the dread out. People think I'm exhausted because I work in data analytics. Long hours, endless screens. They don't understand. Work is logic. Family is weather. My fatigue isn't from work. It's from being the designated rescuer in a household allergic to accountability. Every Sunday feels like prepping for surgery on a patient who refuses to quit smoking. The porch light flickered twice when I pulled in. Omen or faulty bulb, hard to tell. Mom greeted me with her usual mix of affection and critique. "You look thin," she said, which once meant good, and now means you're failing at something. Inside, Dad was carving the roast like it owed him money. Brooke, my younger sister, lounged with a glass of wine, the kind of beautiful that makes strangers forgive her too quickly. "Gracie," she called, the nickname she knows I hate. "You look so corporate." Dinner began with our usual roles: Dad the authority, Mom the caretaker, Brooke the center of gravity, and me, the financial scaffolding disguised as the eldest daughter. Brooke talked about an art project she was consulting for. Mom bragged about her retired life. Dad offered his latest parable from work. I added something about a new analytics model, careful not to bore them. Nobody asked follow-ups. They never do when the topic doesn't circle back to themselves. The roast was dry, the tension moist. Steam from the potatoes fogged my glasses. I was thinking about escape routes when Brooke leaned back and struck. "So, Grace, any hot dates this month? Or are you still married to your spreadsheets?" Her voice sliced through the air like a nail through silk. Dad chuckled. Mom laughed her, "Don't take it so seriously," laugh. The sound went through me like static. I felt my throat tighten, not from embarrassment, but from years of swallowing this same humiliation, reheated weekly. "It's just a question," Dad said, the word just doing its cruel little job. I could have smiled, deflected, played the good daughter again. Instead, I let the silence bloom. It was enormous, almost holy. Brooke raised her brows. "Relax, we're teasing. You know we love you." The air smelled of rosemary and irony. I looked at them, my family, my audience, and saw for the first time the pattern. They needed me small to feel large, needed my competence as proof of their innocence. And I'd been supplying it, like a steady IV drip of absolution. Mom touched my hand. "We just want you happy, honey. You work so hard. You don't want to wake up and realize you forgot to build a life." I slid my hand out from under hers, slow, polite, deliberate. "I didn't forget," I said. I deferred. The line landed quietly, but it stayed in the air like smoke. Brooke rolled her eyes. "God, you make everything dramatic." Dad cleared his throat, a signal that the conversation was over. The table reset itself. Mom poured more wine. Brooke checked her phone. Dad passed the gravy. The family machine hummed again, perfectly tuned to ignore me. Inside my chest, something shifted. Not an explosion, more like tectonic plates finally deciding to move. I realized I'd built my entire adult life as a safety net for people who never once looked down to thank me for holding them. The rest of dinner blurred. Stories about neighbors, health complaints, the soundtrack of small grievances. I laughed when I was supposed to, nodded on cue, even helped clear the plates. Years of habit make obedience feel like love. In the bathroom mirror, I studied the woman staring back, eyes sharp, smile rehearsed. "This ends soon," I whispered. The words sounded foreign, dangerous, right. When I returned, Brooke was talking about moving into a downtown loft. "You should come see it," she said brightly. "Maybe you'll finally like the city again?" I smiled, the kind that doesn't reach anywhere real. "Maybe," I said. We did the dishes. Dad read the mail aloud like a sermon. Mom hummed to fill the silence. When I hugged her goodbye, she smelled like lemon soap and anxiety. Dad patted my back once, already turning away. Brooke air-kissed, half distracted by a notification. Outside, the rain had softened to mist. The porch light flickered again, a single small pulse, like a heartbeat fading. I stood there, hearing the house breathe without me. The drive home was a long corridor of headlights and reflections. My wipers whispered the same rhythm over and over. No, no, no. Each sweep cleared another layer of the old self I'd been trained to maintain. In my apartment, silence greeted me like mercy. No voices, no expectations, just the steady hum of my own survival. Every ending begins quietly. Mine started at that dinner table, somewhere between a cruel joke and a single thought that finally refused to stay buried. Enough. I woke up the next morning to silence, the kind that feels borrowed, as if the world hasn't noticed you're awake yet. Light seeped through the blinds in pale slats, dust drifting through it like static. My throat still ached from holding words hostage the night before. I made coffee without thinking, muscle memory taking over. Grind, pour, wait, pour again. The smell filled my small Seattle apartment, clean and honest, like something earned. The first sip was scalding. I didn't wait for it to cool. Maybe I wanted it to hurt a little. Pain, at least, means you're awake. The inbox was already blooming with corporate emergencies. Subject lines dressed like fires. Urgent, blocker, need clarity. I stared at them, then clicked them all as read. The world could spin without me for one morning. But inside, a war was brewing, the quiet kind that starts in the stomach and climbs toward the heart. I kept replaying Brooke's laughter, Mom's hand patting mine, Dad's throat-clearing authority. The performance had ended, but the echo of it still rattled around my ribs. I told myself it was just another Sunday dinner gone wrong, that I was overreacting. But I wasn't. The joke had landed on a fault line years in the making. Every eye roll, every, "You're so lucky you have money" sense, every, "You're the stable one." All of it had shaped a cage lined with velvet and guilt. I looked around my apartment. It was neat, precise, everything in its place. Books alphabetized, mugs lined up, a life optimized. It should have comforted me, but instead it felt sterile, like I'd engineered order to hide the mess I carried from them. That's when I opened my budget app, my quiet confessional. Numbers don't lie. They record the past like scripture. Transfer after transfer, year after year. Rent, loans, hospital bills, mortgage payments, 82,45 over 7 years. The sum glared at me like a mirror. Each line had a memory attached. Mom crying about the roof leaking, Dad swearing he'd pay it back, Brooke's temporary job loss. I'd canceled a trip to Europe to cover their hospital copay. I'd skipped therapy because the deductible felt selfish. I'd traded my own freedom for their comfort, and they'd turned it into expectation. The screen blurred. I blinked hard. "This is the last time," I whispered. But that was the same promise I'd made 20 times before. I scrolled through messages from Mom, cheerful guilt disguised as love. Can you help us cover next month's insurance? You're such a blessing, sweetheart. We don't know what we'd do without you. And Brooke, always charmingly shameless. Sis, you're the only one who gets how stressful it is to adult. Adult? She said it like a verb she'd outsourced to me. My chest tightened. I realized I'd been living on autopilot, buying forgiveness with direct deposits. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was their safety net, invisible until torn. The kettle whistled. I shut it off, palms pressed to the counter. This isn't normal, I said out loud, testing the sound of rebellion. My voice trembled, but it didn't break. Outside, the city was waking up. Buses groaning, seagulls crying over dumpsters, construction drills starting their metallic prayer. I stared out the window at a man walking his dog and envied the simplicity of it. Two creatures who needed nothing from each other but presence. Then my phone buzzed. Mom, hope you slept well, honey. We're so proud of how you hold this family together. I stared at the words until they stopped meaning anything. Hold this family together. Like glue, like duct tape, like an unpaid therapist. I typed back, I'll call later, and set the phone face down. The rest of the day unspooled in fragments. Laundry, half-hearted work, the faint hum of denial. But under it all, something was shifting. For the first time, I wasn't smoothing it over. I wasn't translating their cruelty into care. By evening, the apartment felt too small for my thoughts. I laced up my sneakers and walked. Down to the pier, where the wind came off the sound cold and merciless. I watched the ferries glide across the water, tiny lights cutting through mist. They moved with purpose. I envied that. The smell of salt and rain filled my lungs, grounding me. I thought about my 20s, about the girl who wanted to move to New York, to write, to live wildly. She had vanished somewhere between my father's mortgage and Brooke's emergency credit card bills. I'd been so busy keeping everyone afloat that I'd forgotten to swim myself. A text popped up, from Brooke. Dinner was fun last night. You were quiet though. Everything okay? My jaw clenched. Fun. That word sat like a stone in my gut. I almost replied, You humiliated me in front of our parents, but deleted it. She wouldn't understand. She never has. Instead, I typed 3 words. I'm just tired. And for once, it wasn't a lie. When I got home, I turned on no lights. The city glittered through the blinds, fractured and distant. I sat on the floor with my laptop glowing like confession. I opened my bank again, moved my cursor over the recurring transfers labeled family support. My hand hesitated, not from doubt, but from habit. My pulse raced as I clicked cancel. The confirmation message appeared. Are you sure you want to stop this transfer? Yes. Click. Done. The screen blinked. The words appeared in soft blue. Transfer canceled. I stared at it for a long time. My throat loosened. The air felt lighter, strange, almost new. It wasn't victory. It was release, like exhaling after years of holding my breath underwater. For the first time in a decade, I'd chosen myself. I leaned back against the wall, eyes burning. Outside, sirens wailed somewhere far away. I whispered, No more rescues. The sound of my own voice startled me. Not fragile, not broken, just certain. I didn't feel guilty. I felt alive. That night, as I slid into bed, the sheets cool against my skin, I realized the real betrayal hadn't been theirs. It had been mine, betraying myself in the name of loyalty. But that ends now. Tomorrow, they'll notice the silence in their bank account. And when they do, for once, they'll have to sit with it. Because I won't be saving them this time. I'll be saving me. By Wednesday, the silence had texture. It hummed around my phone like static, filling every second between emails and meetings. I'd canceled the transfers on Sunday night. By Monday morning, I was already bracing for impact. But nothing came. Not a call, not a text. For a few hours, I let myself believe maybe they hadn't noticed, or maybe they finally understood. But that illusion lasted about as long as my second cup of coffee. At 9:42 a.m., my phone lit up. Mom. Then again. Dad. Then Brooke, with her signature 3-message assault. Hey, weird question. Did your bank mess up? Our mortgage autopay didn't go through. Can you check? I stared at the screen, thumb hovering. My pulse thudded low and steady. The version of me that always fixed, always smoothed, wanted to reply immediately, to make the discomfort disappear. But the new me, the one born at that dinner table, let the messages sit unread. By noon, Mom's tone had shifted. Sweetheart, there must be a glitch. Can you just look into it? By 3, it was Dad's turn. This isn't responsible, Grace. We had an agreement. An agreement? I laughed out loud. No, Dad, we never had an agreement. We had a pattern. You take, I give, you forget. I forgive. When the phone rang again, I let it buzz until the room vibrated with it. My coworker glanced at me from across the open floor plan, eyebrows raised. I smiled like I was fine. The professional mask. I'd worn it so long it fit perfectly. That night, Brooke broke the silence with a voice memo. Her favorite way to weaponize sincerity. Her tone was sugar wrapped around barbed wire. Grace, come on. You know I'm bad with money. You've always been the responsible one. Why would you suddenly pull the rug out like that? I'm literally trying to get my life together here. Don't make it harder. I replayed it once, twice. Her voice had the same cadence she used in high school when she'd wrecked Dad's car. Regretful, but never accountable. Always the victim of her own choices. I didn't respond. I poured myself a glass of wine instead. Cheap Merlot, slightly metallic. And sat by the window watching rain thread down the glass. My reflection looked older than I remembered, but steadier too. The next day, the messages grew sharper. After everything we've done for you, you wouldn't even have your career without us. You're being cruel, Grace. Cruel. That word. I'd been terrified of it my whole life. Women like me, the quiet fixers, the ones who patch holes before anyone sees them. We're trained to believe saying no is violence. But now I knew better. Boundaries aren't cruelty, they're CPR. By Friday, the dam broke. Mom called during my lunch break. Her voice trembling, not from sadness, but from outrage. Grace, your father and I can't believe you'd put us in this position. We've relied on that support for years. We thought we raised you better than this. I stood at my desk, fingers gripping the edge. You didn't raise me, I said quietly. You drained me. There was a pause, the kind of silence that reveals too much. Then Mom whispered, "How dare you speak to me that way?" I ended the call before she could say more. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from adrenaline. It felt like cracking open a window in a room that had been sealed for decades. That night, I drove back to Portland. Not to make peace, but to end the cycle face to face. The highway shimmered with rain, headlights slicing through fog. By the time I reached my parents' driveway, the porch light glowed like a warning beacon. Inside, the familiar smell of lemon polish and stale air wrapped around me. Brooke was there too, pacing with her phone in hand, eyes sharp. Dad looked up from his chair, jaw set. We need to talk. I figured, I said, hanging my coat. The room fell silent except for the soft tick of the wall clock, a metronome marking years of unspoken resentment. Dad started first. Your mother and I feel blindsided. You didn't even discuss this with us. It wasn't a discussion, I replied. It was a correction. Brooke scoffed. You think you're some kind of martyr, don't you? Newsflash, Grace. Money doesn't make you better than us. No, I said, steady. But accountability does. Mom clutched her hands together. We're family. Families help each other. I met her eyes. I have helped. For 7 years. While you pretended not to notice. Dad's voice rose. Don't take that tone with your mother. That tone. The phrase that has shut me down since childhood. But this time, I didn't shrink. I set my spoon down. It made a small, clean sound against the table. Tell me something, Brooke. Where's your money? All those ventures? Those nights out? The loans you promised to repay? She blinked, color rising in her cheeks. That's not the point. Oh, I think it is. Mom's voice cracked. Grace, please. But I didn't stop. The words had waited too long. I've covered your debts, your mortgage, your mistakes. I've been the glue, the lifeline, the insurance policy. And you know what I get in return? Jokes. Mockery. Silence. The air went still. Dad's eyes hardened. You're being disrespectful. No, I said, rising from my chair. I'm being honest. The sound that followed wasn't loud, but final. The scrape of my chair across the floor, the rustle of my coat, the quiet click of my purse clasp. Brooke crossed her arms. So what? You're just walking out? Going to punish us? I looked at her. No, I'm going to stop punishing myself. When I reached the door, Mom's voice broke behind me. Grace, please don't do this. I turned back one last time. You already did. The door shut behind me with a thud that felt biblical. Rain hit. The porch like applause, sharp, relentless, cleansing. For the first time in years, I didn't look back. As I drove away, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror, eyes red but unbroken, face lit by passing headlights. My hands were steady on the wheel, my breathing even. Freedom doesn't roar. It exhales. That night, the sound of the door slamming replayed in my head over and over, not as regret, but as music. The closing note of a symphony I didn't know I'd been writing. I didn't sleep that night. I drove until the highway turned into dawn, until the sky bruised from black to gray and the coffee in my cup holder went cold. The silence inside the car felt enormous, like something had been extracted from my chest and left an echo behind. When I finally reached Seattle, the city was still half asleep, fog curling between the buildings. My apartment welcomed me with its usual stillness, the hum of the fridge, the faint scent of detergent and coffee grounds. It felt cleaner than ever. Or maybe I just finally belonged to it. I dropped my bag on the floor, sat on the couch, and stared at the wall. My hands were trembling, but my heart was steady. I wasn't sure if it was relief or grief, or both tangled in the same breath. There's a moment after an earthquake when everything looks intact but isn't. You can't tell which walls are still load-bearing and which are waiting to fall. That's how I felt. As if my life had been quietly rearranged overnight, and I was sitting inside its new shape, learning the geography. My laptop sat open on the coffee table. I didn't mean to, but my fingers opened my banking app again. Muscle memory. The numbers blinked back at me, cold and honest. 82,345. 7 years. Each dollar, a quiet apology for someone else's mistake. I scrolled through the transactions, transfers to Mom and Dad, checks to Brooke Whitman. Rent, repairs, medical bills, the mortgage that should have been their responsibility. Every payment was a story of something I'd traded away. There was the $1,800 I'd wired the day my father's consulting work dried up. The $3,200 when Mom fell and needed surgery. The $6,000 for Brooke's business investment that turned into a vacation. Each line glowed on the screen like a scar. I whispered the total aloud. 82,345. Saying it felt like exorcism. I thought about the trip I didn't take to Europe when I was 27. The one I postponed because Dad's property tax notice arrived. About the art class I never enrolled in because Brooke needed a little boost. The therapist I stopped seeing because insurance didn't cover it, and my mother's prescription did. For years, I told myself I was doing the right thing. That's how duty disguises itself. It wears morality like perfume. But looking at those numbers, I didn't feel noble. I felt robbed. Not by them, but by the version of me who thought love meant depletion. A sudden nausea rose in my throat. I slammed the laptop shut, stood up, paced. God, I muttered. What was I thinking? Then softer. How did I let it go this far? The answer came without effort. Because they needed me. Because I wanted to be needed. Because if I wasn't the savior, I didn't know who I was. The kettle clicked off behind me, startling me back into the present. I poured hot water into my mug and watched the tea leaves swirl like storm clouds. My reflection on the surface looked foreign, older, sharper, stripped of the gentle lies I'd fed myself. I carried the mug to the window and stared out at the street below, a quiet procession of commuters, umbrellas, early joggers. Everyone seemed to be moving toward something. I'd been standing still for years. That realization hit like a cold gust. I had built my life around maintaining theirs. My phone buzzed on the table. For a moment, I didn't move. I already knew who it was. Mom. Again. I turned the screen over without reading. A minute later, another buzz. Brooke this time. Then Dad. A trio of ghosts that refused to fade. I didn't answer. I wouldn't. Instead, I opened the laptop again, logged in, canceled every automatic transfer. One by one, the confirmation messages stacked up like tiny victories. Transfer canceled, transfer canceled, transfer canceled. Each click felt like peeling off another layer of old skin. When the last one disappeared, I closed the laptop and leaned back. The air felt different, lighter, unburdened. My lungs expanded like they'd just remembered how. I whispered it again, slower this time. No more. A laugh escaped me, half relief, half disbelief. It sounded strange, like a sound I hadn't made in years. Then I did something radical. I opened a travel site. My cursor hovered over the Book Now button for a flight to Florence, the same trip I'd canceled 7 years ago. The price had doubled. I didn't care. I booked it. My heart pounded as the confirmation email arrived. Departure. 2 weeks from now. A small rebellion disguised as a vacation. That night, I lit a candle. I wrote in my journal, something I hadn't done since college, and told myself the truth. I've spent my life keeping others safe from their own chaos. I mistook that for love, but love shouldn't drain you dry. It should grow you. I stared at the words until the ink blurred. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a daughter or a provider. I felt like a person. One with edges, with needs, with limits. Outside, rain began tapping softly on the window. The city lights blurred, smearing gold and gray. I imagined my family back in Portland, sitting around the same table, replaying the argument, twisting the narrative until I became the villain. Maybe I was? Maybe villains are just women who stop apologizing. I smiled at the thought. The clock struck midnight. I blew out the candle and whispered the only prayer that mattered. Let them find their own way. As I lay in bed, I thought of the house I'd saved, the one with the porch light that flickered like a dying promise. I realized I didn't need to save it anymore. Some things are meant to collapse, so others can stand. Tomorrow, I would wake up to the same gray Seattle sky, the same coffee, the same inbox. But something irreversible had shifted. I wasn't waiting for permission to live my own life. I'd already given it to myself. Peace lasted exactly 48 hours. By the third morning, the illusion cracked. My phone lit up with missed calls, 12 from Mom, 8 from Dad, 3 from Brooke. The kind of silence I'd chosen was not one they could tolerate. They needed noise, chaos, the oxygen of control. I ignored the first wave, then the second. But by noon, the third came with a message from my mother that read, "Grace, we don't deserve this kind of treatment. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us?" Repay. The word hit me like static. My chest tightened. I'd been repaying them for 7 years. I owed them nothing but truth, and they couldn't afford that. I set my phone face down on the counter and went back to work. My screen blurred with spreadsheets and Slack messages. But my mind was elsewhere, tangled in a storm of guilt and resolve. At 3:00 p.m., a new voicemail arrived. It was Dad, calm but sharp, the tone of a man used to winning arguments by volume. "Grace, I think you're confused about your responsibilities. We're family. We've always supported you. Don't throw away your character over a little money." A little money. I could have screamed. That night, the group chat exploded. Brooke first typing in all caps. "What the hell, Grace? You made Mom cry. You're acting like some cold stranger. What happened to you?" Then Mom again. "You know we count on you. You're breaking this family apart." Then Dad's text. "You're punishing us for being imperfect. That's cruel, Grace. Cruel." There it was again. The weaponized word. The one meant to drag me back into the role of caretaker. I stared at the glowing screen in my dark apartment, the messages stacking like verdicts. The air felt heavy with accusation, but something inside me stayed eerily calm. I had expected rage. Instead, I felt clarity. They weren't grieving my absence. They were panicking about their inconvenience. I locked my phone, slid it into a drawer, and turned off the lights. For the first time, I didn't respond. Not to soothe, not to explain, not to apologize. Silence was my rebellion. The next morning, I booked a trip. Not the Florence one, that was still weeks away, but something smaller, immediate. A weekend cabin on Whidbey Island. Just ocean, forest, and my own pulse. When the confirmation email arrived, I stared at it like it was proof of life. By the time Friday came, the onslaught had evolved from guilt to guilt mixed with manipulation. Mom texted a photo of the family dinner table, half empty, captioned, "We miss you." Brooke followed with a selfie, tear-streaked, dramatic. "You broke Mom's heart." Dad didn't text this time. He emailed. Subject line, "Let's be adults about this." Body, "You've made your point. Now please reinstate the transfers so we can move forward as a family." I laughed. Out loud. The sound startled me. Sharp. Honest. Move forward as a family. Translation. Pretend this never happened. Resume the script. Instead, I opened my notes app and started typing. Not a reply, but a record. Every message, every date, every manipulation. Evidence. Not for revenge, for clarity. I was beginning to understand something I'd ignored for years. Control isn't always loud. Sometimes it sounds like love. That night, I walked through my apartment tidying without thought. Folding laundry, watering plants, rearranging shelves. Rituals of order. But when I looked around, something felt different. This space wasn't just clean. It was mine. Every bill paid with my own hands. Every piece of furniture bought without guilt. I poured a glass of wine and sat on the floor, leaning against the couch. The city outside was a mosaic of lights. Lives happening independently, unburdened by obligation. I envied them, but I also realized I'd join them. My phone buzzed again. This time, I checked it. Not because I wanted to, but because I was ready. It was Brooke. You think you're so strong, but you'll come back. You always do. I reread it twice. Then, slowly, I began typing. Not this time. I hit send. No explanations, no anger, just truth. Almost instantly, the 3 dots appeared. Brooke typing, then stopped. Then again. Then nothing. I set the phone aside and smiled faintly. Silence was louder than any answer she could give. The next morning, I woke to sunlight. Actual sunlight. My first thought wasn't dread or duty. It was coffee. Just coffee. That felt revolutionary. I packed my bag and drove north, toward the island. The air grew cleaner with every mile, the horizon widening as if the world was finally giving me space to breathe. When I reached the ferry, I parked and stood on deck, wind tearing through my hair. The ocean below was a steel sheet, endless and unbothered. Somewhere between the mainland and the island, I realized I hadn't lost a family. I'd escaped a dependency. At the cabin, I built a fire, made tea, and sat by the window watching waves crush themselves into foam. For the first time in years, I didn't have to earn my peace. It just existed. I took out my journal and wrote, I am not cruel for choosing myself. I am whole because I finally did. The phone buzzed once more on the table. Mom again. I let it ring until it stopped. Then I did something small but sacred. I turned it off completely. That night, I lay in bed listening to rain on the roof, the fire crackling beside me. The world felt quieter, smaller, right-sized. I thought of my father's voice calling me selfish, my mother's tears, Brooke's anger, all the ways they'd tried to pull me back into orbit. But they couldn't reach me here. Not anymore. In the dark, I whispered a promise to myself. This silence is not loneliness. It's freedom learning to breathe. I smiled, let the sound of the rain drown the past, and drifted to sleep. Tomorrow, I'd start documenting everything. Messages, records, receipts. Not out of spite, out of preparation. Because I knew them. They wouldn't let go quietly. And when they came for the version of me they used to own, they'd find no one left to save. The message came Friday night, cold and businesslike. Family meeting, Sunday, 6 p.m. We need to clear the air. Dad, no. Please. No pretense of affection. Just authority, assuming I'd fall in line. I stared at the screen until the glow faded, then typed back a single word that felt both terrifying and necessary. Fine. Sunday came gray and wet. The air over Seattle felt heavy, like it knew what was waiting for me down in Portland. I dressed slow, deliberate. Navy blazer, clean white shirt, black pants, hair pulled tight. No softness. Everything about me said, you can't manipulate what you don't recognize. The drive south felt like driving through old ghosts. Rain pattered on the windshield in steady rhythm, each mile loosening and tightening something inside me. I'd rehearsed this conversation 100 times in my head, but I knew better. Families don't follow scripts. They improvise guilt. When I turned into their street, the porch light was already on. It buzzed faintly in the drizzle, flickering like an omen. Mom opened the door before I even reached it. Grace, you look so professional. Her voice carried that brittle brightness she used when she wanted to pretend everything was fine. Hi, Mom. My tone was flat, even, neutral as a locked door. Inside, the air smelled of lemon cleaner and roast chicken. The classic Whitman disguise for tension. Dad stood by the fireplace, bourbon glass in hand, though it looked untouched. Brooke sat curled on the couch, scrolling her phone with one manicured thumb, pretending not to care. We appreciate you coming, Dad said, in his careful, practiced tone. The one he used on school boards and clients, a man who still thought control sounded like reason. You said it was important, I replied. Let's not waste time. Brooke smirked without looking up. Wow, The CEO has arrived. Enough, Mom said sharply, though her eyes flicked toward me, gauging my reaction. I didn't give her one. Dad began pacing. Grace, we need to talk about this situation. The way you've handled things has been, well, disrespectful. You blindsided us. Disrespectful? I repeated, folding my hands. Because I stopped sending you money? He hesitated, then said, because you didn't talk to us first. We're a family. We communicate. I almost laughed. No, we perform. You talk. I listen. You take. I provide. That's not communication. That's a transaction. Brooke rolled her eyes. God, here we go. I knew you'd make this a monologue. You love being the martyr. I turned to her, calm as glass. I love paying your rent too, apparently. Her jaw tightened. You didn't have to. You chose to. Yeah, I said. That's how manipulation works. It always feels like choice until it's not. Mom reached across the table, her eyes soft, pleading. Sweetheart, it's not about the money. It's about family. We depend on each other. No, you depend on me, I said quietly. That's the difference. Dad's voice hardened. You've changed, Grace. You used to be grateful. You used to care. I still care, I said. I just don't confuse care with servitude anymore. Brooke gave a sharp laugh. Servitude? Oh, come on. You make 6 figures. You can afford to help. I met her gaze. You're right. I can afford to help. I can't afford to disappear. The air thickened. Mom's eyes glossed, tears forming with the precision of habit. We're scared, honey. We're getting older. We thought you'd be there for us. I have been, I said. For years. I've covered mortgages, medical bills, loans, everything. I've been there so much I forgot where I was. Dad slammed his glass down. Watch your tone. I didn't even flinch. That's the problem, Dad. My tone changes and suddenly I'm the villain. But my silence? You've always applauded that. He stepped forward, voice rising. We raised you better than this. No, I said, steady. You raised me to be useful. And you taught me that usefulness equals love. But I'm rewriting that equation. Brooke snorted. God, you sound like a self-help podcast. Maybe, I said. But at least I'm finally listening to myself. The silence that followed was long and heavy. Even the rain outside seemed to pause. Mom spoke first, voice trembling. Grace, please. You'll regret this someday. Maybe, I said softly. But regret is lighter than resentment. I stood, smoothing my blazer, the movement slow and deliberate. Brooke's arms were crossed, chin tilted, trying to look smug, but her eyes darted toward Dad. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him, his confidence leaking away like air from a punctured tire. You think you're better than us, he said finally, but the words lacked conviction. No, I said, just done being less. I picked up my bag. I love you. I always will, but I won't keep paying for your peace at the cost of mine. Mom's hand trembled. Grace, don't walk out. I already did, I said, and turned for the door. Outside, the rain was colder, steadier. Behind me, voices rose, Dad's fury, Brooke's sarcasm, Mom's tears, the same old chorus I'd been conducting for years. I didn't stop to listen. In the car, I sat still for a long time before turning the key. My hands weren't shaking, my heart wasn't racing, just quiet, steady, whole. Through the windshield, the porch light flickered once, twice, then dimmed into darkness. The house looked smaller now, like a memory I could finally fit inside without drowning. As the engine hummed to life, I whispered to the empty car, "This isn't cruelty. It's clarity." I pulled onto the road. The rain blurred everything behind me into a watercolor of headlights and ghosts. I could almost hear Dad's voice echoing. We love you. We love you. But it sounded like a negotiation. For the first time, I didn't stop to interpret it. Freedom, I realized, isn't loud. It's the moment your body forgets to brace for impact. The freeway opened ahead, slick and endless. I rolled down the window. Cold air swept in, smelling of rain and renewal. From now on, I said to the night, voice steady and sure, I stand with me. And this time, I believed it. The house looked different when I walked back into it a week later, not because anything had changed, but because I had. I wasn't planning to return. But then came Dad's message, the kind that sounded polite until you heard the steel underneath. We need to resolve this like adults. Bring your records if you insist on exaggerating what you've done for this family. I read it twice, then opened my folder, the one with every transfer receipt, every email, every "thank you, sweetheart." That was really a transaction. For 7 years, I'd documented everything without knowing why. Maybe I'd always expected this moment, when truth would need a paper trail. When I arrived, the air inside the house felt thick, humid with tension. Brooke was there again, perched on the couch like a witness for the prosecution. Mom sat rigidly at the table, eyes red, hands twisted in her lap. Dad stood at the counter, a stack of papers beside him like armor. He didn't say hello, just, sit down. I did. Slowly, calmly. I've had enough of this, he said, voice clipped. You've accused your own family of taking advantage of you. You've disrespected your mother. You've made a mockery of everything we've done. Everything I've done, I corrected. Let's start there. I pulled the folder from my bag and laid it on the table. The papers fanned out like a map of my silence. Bank transfers, medical payments, mortgage checks, all neatly labeled. 82,345, I said. That's not exaggeration, that's math. Brooke laughed under her breath. You really brought receipts? I turned to her. I brought facts. They don't need applause. Dad's face hardened. You're acting like a stranger, Grace. You think money defines love? No, I said. But it exposed yours. He bristled. Watch it. No, I said again. I've watched my tone my whole life. Now you can watch the evidence. I flipped through the folder, the rhythm of the pages steady, surgical. Here's the mortgage payment from May 2018, the hospital bill from Mom's fall, the credit card payoff for Brooke's startup. And this, I pulled out a final document, printed from an email attachment I'd discovered 2 days earlier, is where it stops being about kindness. Dad frowned. What is that? Your refinance paperwork, I said quietly. The one you filed 3 years ago. The one with my signature on it. Mom blinked. What? I slid the page toward her. My signature, I said. Only I never signed it. The silence that followed was the kind that swallows sound. Even the refrigerator seemed to hold its breath. Dad's mouth opened, then closed. That's absurd. You must have forgotten. Don't, I said sharply. Don't gaslight me. I know my handwriting, and I know when someone's forged it. Brooke's jaw dropped. Wait. Are you saying Dad faked your name? I looked straight at him. He used my credit to secure another mortgage payment. You told me it was under control, but it wasn't. You used me. He slammed his fist against the table. You think I wanted to? We were drowning. I did what I had to do for this family. No, I said, my voice steady. You did what you had to do for your pride. Mom's face went pale. Charles, she whispered, voice trembling. Tell me she's wrong. But he said nothing. Just stared at the papers like they were mutinous. The anger that should have come didn't. What came instead was clarity. Sharp, blinding, clean. This was the moment every boundary had been leading toward. You taught me about integrity, I said softly. You said a person's name was sacred, but you sold mine to keep your own comfort intact. He opened his mouth, but I cut him off. Don't explain. Don't justify. Just know I know. Brooke stood now, her voice higher than usual. Oh my God. You forged her signature? Stay out of this, Dad barked. No, I said. She should hear it. You both should. This isn't just about money. It's about the moment a father decided his daughter's trust was collateral. Mom covered her face. Grace, please, don't do this. We can fix it. Not we, I said. I've already fixed too much. I reached into my bag again and pulled out an envelope. My lawyer will be in touch. The bank's been notified. Dad's eyes went wide. You're suing your own father? No, I said. I'm holding him accountable. There's a difference. He laughed bitterly. You've lost your mind. Maybe, I said. Or maybe I finally found it. For the first time in my life, I watched my father lose his composure. His shoulders slumped, his mouth trembled. Behind the fury, I saw fear, not of the law, but of being seen. I'm doing this for both of us, I said. Because if I let it go again, I'll never stop letting it happen. Mom reached across the table, but I pulled back. Her touch used to feel like comfort. Tonight it felt like a leash. Grace, please, she whispered. We're family. Family isn't immunity, I said. It's responsibility. The room went utterly silent. Brooke stepped back, eyes darting between us, and for once, she didn't speak. I gathered the papers, slid them neatly into the folder, and stood. My voice was calm when I said, "This ends here." At the doorway, Dad said hoarsely, "You'll destroy us." I turned. No, you did that when you stopped telling the truth. Outside, the sky was a flat, endless gray. The air smelled like wet pavement and endings. As I walked to my car, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't even feel angry. Just clear. Like someone who's been underwater too long and has finally surfaced. I sat behind the wheel, rain tapping against the windshield, and whispered to no one in particular, I didn't ruin the family. I just stopped pretending it wasn't already broken. The words hung there, quiet and sure, before dissolving into the hum of the storm. The call from the bank came 2 weeks later. The woman's voice was calm, procedural. Ms. Whitman, we've concluded the investigation. The signature was indeed fraudulent. The mortgage will be restructured under your father's name alone. I thanked her, hung up, and stared at the phone like it might explode. It didn't. It just sat there, silent, innocent, while the truth rearranged itself inside me. I'd thought exposing the lie would feel like justice. It didn't. It felt like pulling out a nail that had rusted into your skin, necessary, but far from relief. By the next morning, the fallout had begun. Brooke's name lit up on my screen, over and over. Then Mom. Then Dad. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The silence itself was an answer. That evening, a voicemail arrived from Brooke. Her voice was sharp, brittle around the edges. You've ruined everything. The bank's freezing the accounts. Mom's panicking. Dad won't leave the house. I hope you're happy. I wasn't. I was awake. 3 days later, I drove down to Portland. Not to reconcile, but to witness what was left. The house was quieter than I'd ever heard it. No laughter, no music. Just the sound of a clock ticking like it was running out of time. Boxes lined the hallway. A for sale sign leaned against the wall, half assembled. Brooke opened the door, her eyes red, her mascara uneven. They're selling the house, she said flatly. I know. You did this, she said, and her voice cracked on the last word. I stopped it, I said. There's a difference. She shook her head, laughing without humor. You always think you're the hero. You burn the whole thing down just to prove you were right. No, I said. I burned it down because you kept pretending it wasn't already on fire. She didn't respond, just stepped aside to let me in. Inside, the living room looked stripped. No family photos, no warm light, no trace of the illusion we'd all helped maintain. Mom sat at the kitchen table staring at a stack of unopened letters. Her hands were trembling. When she saw me, she flinched, then tried to smile. "Grace," she whispered, as if saying my name might change the air between us. "Hi, Mom." Her voice cracked. "It's all falling apart." "I know," I said quietly. "It had to." She wiped at her eyes. "You think this is strength? Watching your family lose everything?" "No," I said. "Strength is finally letting consequences catch up." She looked at me with something close to hatred, or maybe heartbreak. "You've always been so proud," she said. "So sure you're the only one who sees clearly." "Someone had to," I said. A sound came from the hallway, a slow shuffle, the uneven rhythm of age and guilt. Dad appeared in the doorway, thinner somehow, smaller. The authority was gone from his shoulders. "Grace," he said, voice gravel and shame. "We didn't mean for it to go this far." "You forged my name," I said. "It went that far the moment you picked up a pen." He didn't argue, just nodded, eyes down. "The house. They're taking it." "I know." He laughed softly, bitterly. "Funny. All these years, you were the one who saved it. Now you're the one watching it go." "That's the irony," I said. "You built this place out of debt." I just stopped pretending it was home. Mom whispered, "Where will we go?" "I don't know," I said honestly, "but it's time you figured it out without me." Brooke, leaning against the counter, muttered, "You're unbelievable." I turned to her. "Maybe. But at least I'm real." The silence that followed was thicker than grief. It was recognition. The sound of people realizing the person they'd used as glue had stopped holding them together. I walked through the house one last time. My footsteps echoed in empty rooms. The walls were bare where the family portraits had hung, the paint lighter in rectangles where years of smiling faces had covered the truth. In the living room, I stopped in front of the big window that overlooked the street. I used to sit there as a teenager, watching rain slide down the glass, imagining escape. Now the rain was still there, and I finally was too. Behind me, Dad spoke softly. "You think you'll sleep better now?" "I already do," I said. Mom's voice rose, brittle with fury. "You think you're blameless? You think walking away makes you holy?" "No," I said. "It just makes me honest." I picked up the one photo still left on the mantel. The four of us at Cannon Beach, wind in our hair, sun in our eyes, before any of us knew how broken we'd become. For a second, I almost slipped. Almost felt that old ache to fix it, to put everyone back where they belonged. Then I set the photo down, face down on the mantel, and walked out. Outside, the for sale sign was planted now, angled into the wet earth. The house behind me looked tired, deflated, a monument to every boundary I hadn't drawn soon enough. I stood there for a long moment, letting the rain soak through my coat, until it no longer felt cold. In another life, I might have gone back inside, offered comfort, apologized for being right, but not this life, not anymore. When I finally got into the car, my reflection in the rearview mirror looked older, steadier, almost serene. As I pulled away, I glanced once more at the house, the porch light glowing faintly through the rain. The same light that had once guided me home now looked like a warning beacon for someone else. And in that moment, I understood something simple, something brutal. Sometimes saving yourself means letting everything else collapse. The house grew smaller in the mirror until it disappeared. Ahead of me, the road stretched open, dark, wet, Endless. I whispered it again. The same. Words that had carried me this far. This isn't loss. It's release. And for the first time, it felt true. The house sounded hollow when I walked in. Every footstep echoing like a memory that didn't know when to stop repeating. Boxes were stacked against the walls, labels written in Mom's small, neat handwriting. Linens, kitchen, keep, Brooke, Misk. The furniture had been sold off or donated. Only the old dining table remained, sitting in the middle of the room like a relic that refused to leave. I placed a grocery bag on the table. A store-bought rotisserie chicken, a tub of mashed potatoes, paper plates. No rituals, no wine, no candles. If this was going to be our final dinner, I wanted it stripped to the bone. Mom appeared first, cardigan wrapped tight around her shoulders. She looked smaller than I remembered, like the house had been feeding off her. "You didn't have to bring food," she said quietly. "I didn't cook," I replied. That seemed fitting. Brooke followed, phone in hand, mascara smudged like she'd been crying and didn't want anyone to notice. She looked at the food, then at me. "This is depressing?" "Honesty usually is," I said. We set the plates down. The chairs scraped the floor, echoing through the empty rooms. A few minutes later, Dad entered. His shoulders looked uneven, his eyes shadowed by weeks of denial. He didn't speak at first. Just sat. No one prayed. No one toasted. We just started eating. The silence was thick, filled with the kind of politeness that hides exhaustion. After a few bites, I said, "This isn't a goodbye dinner. It's a last dinner." Brooke frowned. "That's the same thing." "No," I said. "Goodbye is about leaving. Last is about changing." Mom sighed, rubbing her temples. "Grace, must you always make everything sound like a manifesto?" "Maybe because I've spent my life being everyone's mission statement," I said. "I'm rewriting it." Dad exhaled through his nose. "So this is what you wanted? To prove your point while everything falls apart?" "I didn't want the fall," I said softly. "I just stopped holding up the roof." He leaned forward, hands clasped. "You've made your stand. What now?" "Now I stop mistaking sacrifice for love," I said. Brooke shook her head, her voice cracking. "You burned everything down to be free. You call that love?" "I call it truth," I said. "And truth always scorches a little." Mom's fork clattered against the plate. "We're selling the house next week," she said. "I hope that makes you happy." "I don't feel happy," I said. "I feel finished." Dad's jaw tightened. "You've changed." "I was supposed to." We sat in silence. The rain pressed softly against the windows, steady and cold. Finally, Mom spoke again, her voice smaller now. "You think you're the only one who got hurt?" "No," I said. "I think I'm the only one who stopped pretending I didn't." Brooke stared at the table, tracing circles, with her fork. "So what are we now?" "A family," I said. "Just not the kind that confuses love with debt." Dad chuckled bitterly. "You sound like a therapist." Maybe I finally became my own. That's when Mom's voice cracked. "Grace." She swallowed hard, words dragging up from someplace old. "I'm sorry. For the years we took and called it love." The apology landed like a soft thud. Real. Uneasy. Fragile. I looked at her hands, the same hands that used to bandage my knees, then later reached for my wallet. "Thank you," I said. She nodded, eyes wet. "You deserved better than the version of us you got." For a second the world stopped spinning. Then Brooke spoke, hesitant. "I messed up too. You always bailed me out. I just thought you'd never stop." "That's what I thought too," I said. She gave a small, shaky laugh. "You're impossible, you know that." "I learned from the best," I said, and we both smiled. Faint, but real. Dad looked down at his plate. I can't fix what I signed, he said quietly, but I can stop signing anything with your name. That's enough, I said. That's all it ever needed to be. The tension in the room thinned. We kept eating, no one rushing to fill the silence. For the first time in years, it didn't feel like something was missing. It felt like something had finally stopped hurting. After dinner, I helped Mom tape a few boxes. We packed the spices from the pantry, jars labeled in fading ink: thyme, cinnamon, rosemary. She held one up and smiled. You always said I used too much of this. You did, I said, grinning, but it smelled like home. When the last box was sealed, I turned to the table one last time. The wood was scarred and faded, but it had held us through years of arguments, celebrations, lies, and truths. It would outlast us all. From my bag, I took out an old Polaroid I'd found weeks ago, the four of us laughing in a driveway covered in snow. I placed it in the center of the table. I'm not throwing this away, I said, but I'm not hanging it up either. Mom touched the photo gently. Maybe that's fair. Dad nodded. Later, he murmured. Yes, I said. Later. We walked together to the door. Brooke lingered, arms folded. If I screw up again, she said, can I still call you? Of course, I said. Just don't expect me to fix it. She smiled. Deal. Mom reached out, almost touched my arm, then stopped. Her fingers hovering in the air like a gesture caught between habit and restraint. Drive safe, okay? I will. Outside, the porch light glowed weakly through the rain. The air smelled like wet cedar and something new trying to grow. I turned back once before getting into my car. Mom stood in the doorway, Brooke behind her, Dad a silhouette against the hall light. They looked smaller, human, unfinished. Like people still learning how to begin again. I lifted a hand. Not goodbye, just acknowledgement. As I drove away, the house faded into the rain, its windows dark, its rooms empty but honest for the first time. For years, I'd believed leaving meant abandoning. Now I understood. Sometimes it's just the only way to make space for love to come back cleaner. The freeway stretched ahead, slick and glimmering. I rolled down the window and whispered, I didn't stop loving them. I just stopped saving them. And for once, the words didn't sound like defiance. They sounded like peace. It happened on a Tuesday morning, the kind that smelled like coffee and rain, quiet but full of small possibilities. I was sitting by the window of my apartment in Seattle, laptop open, when the email arrived. Subject: account update, mortgage documentation resolved. For a second, I didn't move. Then I clicked. The message was short, almost clinical. Ms. Whitman, per your request, we've removed your name from the mortgage records associated with 42 Elm Street. Thank you for your patience and cooperation. That was it. No ceremony, no acknowledgement of what it meant. Just data. But my chest loosened anyway. It was over. I read the words again, slower this time, letting their weight settle. Removed your name. The last tether to the house. The family debt. The endless expectation. Gone. I leaned back in my chair, breathing in the silence that followed. The apartment smelled faintly of lavender and fresh paper. Outside, the city moved at its own rhythm, buses sighing, heels clicking, rain whispering against glass. Life, uncomplicated and indifferent. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was running late for something invisible. I got up and walked to the bookshelf. On the top shelf sat a small wooden box. Smooth, light, no lock. Inside were fragments of a life I had already outgrown. Old receipts, letters, a photo of my family at Cannon Beach. All of us mid-laugh. I lifted the photo, studied it. The wind had been too strong that day. Mom's hair whipped across her face. Brooke squinting. Dad shielding his eyes, me caught off guard, mouth open, laughing. We looked happy. The kind of happy that exists before understanding. For a moment, nostalgia almost won. Then I set the photo gently back into the box and closed the lid. Not thrown away, just placed aside. That's the thing about healing. It's not about erasing the past. It's about giving it a room that isn't the whole house. The kettle whistled softly from the kitchen. I made coffee, strong, dark, and carried it to the window. From my fifth-floor view, the city looked washed clean, all edges softened by mist. People moved like tiny universes, each one carrying their own invisible story. I wasn't thinking about revenge anymore. I was thinking about reclamation, about how saying no had rebuilt something inside me I didn't know was broken. The phone buzzed. Unknown number. For a heartbeat, I almost didn't answer. But curiosity, or maybe courage, won. Hello? A pause. Then a familiar voice, softer than I remembered. Grace. It's Mom. The sound of her name on her own lips made my throat tighten. Hi, I said quietly. I got your letter, she continued. The one about the lawyer and the paperwork. It's done then? It's done. I'm glad. Another pause. Your father's trying. He's started counseling, financial and otherwise. I smiled faintly. That's good. I found your old coffee mug in one of the boxes, she said. The one that says world's most exhausted daughter. It made me laugh. It was accurate, I said. I know, she whispered. I'm sorry for that, Grace, for making it true. The words landed gently this time, not a wound, but a repair. I know, I said. And I'm okay now. Are you? Yes, I said. Finally. There was a silence on the line that didn't hurt. Then Mom exhaled. Maybe when things settle, you can come down for dinner. Just dinner. No expectations. We'll see, I said, but there was warmth in it. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, listening to the quiet hum of the apartment. A small, golden peace was forming. Not loud, not cinematic, just steady. I turned back to my laptop, opened a travel site, and searched Lisbon flights. It was a dream I'd shelved 10 years ago, traded for other people's emergencies. This time, I didn't talk myself out of it. When the confirmation email arrived, I laughed, not because of the trip itself, but because I'd finally learned to say yes for the right reasons. Later, as the sun slipped through the clouds, I grabbed my coat and walked to the park down the street. The air was cold, clean, full of that late afternoon quiet where the city feels almost kind. Children played near the fountain. A couple shared an umbrella. Ordinary things. Beautiful because they didn't demand anything from me. I sat on a bench and watched the light change. Gold to gray to indigo. I thought about everything that had collapsed. The house, the myths, the roles, and how sometimes the collapse isn't destruction, it's revelation. Losing the house didn't ruin me. It revealed where I lived all along, inside my own boundaries, inside a name I'd reclaimed. My phone buzzed again. A text this time, from an old friend I hadn't spoken to in years. Hey, stranger, still owe you coffee. How's life treating you? I smiled and typed back. Better than I'm treating it. Let's catch up. As the message sent, a laugh rose from somewhere deep, light, unguarded, real. The kind of sound that doesn't echo backward. The sky was turning dark, but I didn't feel the usual pull of dread. Just the quiet satisfaction of someone who finally stopped mistaking chaos for love. Before heading home, I whispered to the wind, not a prayer, just a statement. Freedom doesn't feel like winning. It feels like breathing. And then, maybe because the world needed to hear it too, I added one last thought. A truth that had cost me everything to learn. Telling the truth isn't cruel. It's the kindest thing you can do for a life you plan to keep. I slipped my hands into my pockets and started walking. The city lights blinked awake. The night air smelled of promise. And for the first time in a decade, I didn't look back. She didn't burn bridges. She simply stopped carrying the weight of people who never learned to swim. Grace's revenge was never about ruin. It was about release. To stand tall in the wreckage and realize she no longer owed her pain to anyone. Sometimes, healing is the most radical form of revenge. It's choosing peace over proof, choosing yourself without apology. And maybe that's why her story stays with us. Because somewhere, we've all been Grace once. We've all held families together until our hands bled. So tell me, if you were in her place, which line would you finally stop crossing for love? Share your truth below. Maybe someone out there needs your courage to draw their own.